Hey kiddies, it's Triple Feature Tuesday once again, and this week we're going to look at some incredible 80s horror remakes. Guess what? It's my birthday, or it was on Saturday. And as is tradition, I watch whatever the hell I want, and anybody that cares to join me cannot complain whatsoever. But I was nice to everyone this year because all of these movies are incredible. I decided to go with 80s horror remakes that are amazing. These are movies that took horror movies from the 50s, updated them in terms of sensibility and also quality of writing and plotting and character to create two classics. Definitely, at least two of these movies, all other horror movies of their type will be measured against them to determine how successful they are. And then there's another one that's just goddamn awesome. And while not as earth-shattering as the other two is, I think quality-wise goes along with them. So our menu is going to include The Blob, The Fly, and The Thing. Isn't nice? They're all those. Chuck Russell and Frank Darabont's update on The Blob. I'm not going to go into too much detail because I had it in a triple feature recently, or within the last few months. But I love it. This one is definitely the least cerebral of the three movies this week, but it does everything it was supposed to. Like, there's no guarantee that you're going to come up with an earth-shattering new interpretation of a previous film that, enlightens us about man and where we're at in terms of our development as a species. But there's always room for a good monster movie, especially if the monster looks like mobile carnivorous jello. Starring Kevin Dillon and Shawnee Smith, The Blob encapsulates everything that you want in a good horror remake. First and foremost, it happened between 30 and 40 years later. There is no reason to update movies that are 15 years old or younger. It kept the core of the plot and the characters the same. The original, with Steve McQueen, is predominantly about teenagers who find the alien meteorite, the Blob, and have trouble convincing the townspeople that they're under attack from this alien threat. In this one, same thing happens with Kevin Dillon and Shawnee Smith. And it also, the Blob works in pretty much the same way and is taken out in the same fashion, just, with a lot more explosions because, hey, the 80s. But also important is you update the sensibilities for the time period, so the 80s. Well, in the 50s, the big thing was the Red Scare. The Blob represents Russia. You are going to be absorbed into a carnivorous red mass and become part of it and lose your identity and die. Cold War, while still going on at this point, was starting to wrap up. This came out in 1988, but America had definitely lost faith in its leaders ever since Nixon and Watergate, and probably LBJ before that. So in this one, we have more government conspiracy. The Blob, we're given the origin. He's not an alien. He's actually a germ warfare experiment gone horribly wrong, or according to the military scientists in this movie, horribly right. But at the end of the day, we're here for monster movie, and there's just a lot of great gags, a lot of the Blob coming through different things. The Blob looks great. What's funny is when you think about it, while they added all these new and improved special effects, they probably also used every trick from the original Blob too, because practical effects never stop working well. You can only make them better, but they will always work. And when you have so many different things you need the Blob to do, it's probably going to come in handy to know how they did the Blob, how they made the Blob do things back in the 50s. But there's a lot of fun with tropes. Our Paul, Shawnee Smith's initial date, who looks like he's going to be the big hero, is of course not, and it's actually the rebel without a cause, Brian Flagg, played by fairly Cro-Magnon mulleted Kevin Dillon. We have the classic lovers lane scene where it's really hideous. This guy's about to date rape a woman, and unfortunately both of them end up dying because of the Blob. The sheriff gets taken out. It's but they also keep core scenes, like the movie theater scene happens in the original Blob, and that's a big thing, and it happens in this one, and it's great, and it's just a lot of fun. And with the way this triple feature goes, you're going to want to lay down a good foundation of fun. I'm going in the order that I think they should go in, but it's really up to you, more so than normal with these three. So I'm going to go into it as I get farther along in the triple feature. But the Blob, so good. Chuck Russell movies in the 80s and early 90s are great. He did Nightmare on Elm Street Part 3, co-wrote Dreamscape, did The Mask. He's a good time. All right, David Cronenberg's update of The Fly. I will try to keep this down to, say, 50 minutes. Uses a lot of the core structure from the original movie. This one, it was a screenwriter named Edward? No, I think Chuck Pogue adapted the original short story that originally appeared in Playboy. That's what the Vincent Price 50s film was based on, and tried to take it more, use that more as the foundation rather than the original 50s movie. However, both the original film and the story share a lot of things at its core that come up in The Fly, which, for those of you who have never seen any version or read the short story, is about a scientist that develops a teleporter and accidentally goes through it with a fly in the teleporter and slowly becomes a fly. In the original, he quickly becomes a fly but slowly loses his mind to the fly's genes and is eventually commits suicide with help of his wife, who's kind of crazy. But the core thing, teleportation, the fly, losing your mind, physical deformity, and honestly, the romance angle are all there in the original. And then you get Cronenberg's update using Charles Pogue's script. He was very adamant that Pogue get screenwriting credit because Pogue actually has the nuts and bolts of how everything happens and why, and Cronenberg more tweaked the characters and some of the themes of the dialogue to make it more Cronenbergy. Because whereas the original Fly was more of a Prometheus Unbound Frankenstein type story of science gone amok. This David Cronenberg at this point in his career specializes in body horror, fear of the flesh, betrayal of your body. Was what he had overtly intended to be a metaphor for getting older. That's why Jeff Goldblum, Seth Brundle, he deteriorates much in the same way that people do when they get older. You lose your teeth, you lose your hair, you get wrinklier and everything, and it's that. What helps elevate The Fly into one of the greatest horror movies ever made is that it can be a metaphor for any disease. And when it came out, the AIDS scare was very prevalent, and so it quickly became a metaphor for AIDS. But honestly, it can be anything. It can be anything from something as ordinary as dying of just getting older and dying of old age to drug abuse, if you look at it in the right way. And it's just beyond, oh my God, I love this movie. This is the movie that introduced me to Cronenberg, and I've been a lifelong fan ever since. And it's because of the way it's shot, the way Chris Wallace's makeup, which won the Academy Award, because of course it won the Academy Award. Are you seeing this? And all of it is anchored by the performances of Jeff Goldblum, Gina Davis, and John Getz. John Getz never receives enough credit for his role because a lot of people just kind of throw him off as like, oh, he's just this other guy that's annoying. But he is a legitimate leg in this love triangle, because if he's not, Seth did all of this for nothing, and it's even worse than we thought. But it's because he could actually be Gina Davis's boyfriend again that Jeff Goldblum gets scared and gets drunk and then ends up going through the telepod. And oh my God, Jeff Goldblum in this movie. He just lives this part. I remember one of my high school English teachers, Miss Crimmins, said it best, that every time Jeff Goldblum is on screen, he always delivers his lines as if it's the first time he's ever said them. Like, it never feels rehearsed. It always feels natural. And this carries on from when he's just a nerdy scientist to when he has gone full Brundle fly and is ready to eat everything and or fuse with even more things at the end, because he has completely lost his mind. In this one, in comparison to the original, the scientist in the Vincent Price film is instantly horrifically deformed, but slowly loses his mind as the movie goes on. In this one, it's a slow progression of both, and as a result, we get to hear and unfortunately see everything that is happening to Seth as he is being overcome with the fly's genetic structure. And poor Gina Davis, she improved upon from the scientist's wife in the first one. She is a very savvy science reporter, if that's a thing. She's a magazine writer, and she specializes in scientific stuff. Excuse me. But wouldn't science reporter just be an awesome job title? She is not a pushover, and she knows what she wants, so she's not going to take any shit. And this is part of what makes Gina Davis just great. And unfortunately, she's crying for basically the last half hour of the movie, which, if you watch the documentary about the making of the film, is essentially 2 weeks she was crying 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, the poor woman. But it was all worth it because the movie is just flawless. It still works. Because they don't go into too much detail about the goofy teleportation science, it just still works because it never made sense to begin with, so it's not dated at all. One downside, no Vincent Price in this one. He was still around, but, I guess for reasons they didn't want to do it. But God almighty, it's just great. I love the love story. I love the tragedy of the movie, the funny bits, the gross out bits. It's just The Fly. The Fly is so good and a perfect remake in every way. And honestly, the only movie you could follow that with is John Carpenter's The Thing. His update on the original short story, much like The Fly. Who Goes There, which was originally made into a film in the 50s, co-written and produced by Howard Hawks, called The Thing from Another World. It's tricky which order you want to put them in, because I usually like putting them in order of ascending quality and or personal relevance to me. So normally I would put The Fly last, except you can't end the night on The Fly because people are going to be leaving the party and they're going to want to drive their car, off a bridge. So while you have the probably the most excruciating nihilistic ending at the end of The Thing, it's done in a really, really cool way, no pun intended. So I would end on The Thing as opposed to The Fly. Happily, there's no wrong way to do it, and you're winning no matter what, because The Fly and The Thing and The Blob. Oh my God, John Carpenter's The Thing. The third of 5 collaborations with the incredible Kurt Russell. An Antarctic research station is beset by a dog and Norwegians. The Norwegians are shooting at the dog. The American scientists don't know why. The Norwegians get blown up by their helicopter, and the dog remains. It turns out the dog is the thing from another world, an alien that can change shape, absorb you, mimic you perfectly, and replace you, and thereby absorb other people, infiltrate. Once again, we kind of have whereas the Blob eschewed the Cold War. This was back in 1982, so the Cold War was still running pretty cool, I guess. And so you still have that communism fear combined with the body horror sensibilities of, say, David Cronenberg, because the thing becomes you. You don't even know you're the thing right now, because the thing mimics you so perfectly that you think you are the thing until it's time to, stop pretending and be what you really are. The editing of the film enhances the performances as these guys in the most remote place on the planet Earth get more and more paranoid and crazy and scared and raw until they start turning on each other. So what are you going to do? Special effects, I believe they were either Rob Bottin or Rick Bota. I forget which, but I know it's like an RB. And it's still good. With the exception of certain bits in The Blob, all of these movies hold up really well against more recent viewing. And the youngest of these movies, The Blob, is 28 years old, but it still looks good because we're using as many practical effects as possible to make the things look like they're really there. It's sort of a foot race between The Fly and The Thing in terms of which movie is grosser, because, nothing about The Fly is pretty, but god damn, they are finding new and creative ways to have the thing mutate by the end of the movie, and It just seems to be grosser and grosser. And there are parts that are just so legitimately scary and terrifying that even my brother jumped in the middle of them when he saw them for the first time, which I gotta say, it was really, really a lot of fun. And then you get to the end, which is one of the most brutal things ever. It's fun. The John Carpenter puts this as the first of a three-part trilogy, what he calls the Apocalypse trilogy, in which he is trying to destroy the world, or at least kill all the people on it. It starts with The Thing, goes to Prince of Darkness, and then ends in the Mouth of Madness. And The Thing is a really, really great place to start because Kurt Russell, Keith David, Wilford Brimley, to name a few of the great actors in this movie. It's so good. I love all of these movies, and I just want to sit and watch them all in a row and force them on my friends and loved ones, and that's probably what I'm going to do. So I will see you guys next week with probably some comic book stuff because Captain America is coming, people. And I'll see you then.